Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Leadership Lenses, the podcast designed for principals, heads of school, and anyone else looking to improve and enhance Jewish education. Today, I want to talk about a challenging and often one of the most difficult issues that we face as leaders, and that's letting somebody go, or in other words, firing people. And I say firing because I don't want to sugarcoat it. We let people go, we reorganize, we don't renew a contract. Those are all slightly nicer ways to put things. But at the end of the day, when we tell people that they don't have a job with us anymore, that's an extremely difficult piece of news to deliver. It's difficult for the employee, first and foremost, and it's also difficult for us as supervisors. Now, you might be wondering about the timing. It's late July. Most schools already have issued contracts for next year. You really know, in most cases, who's coming back. This is not typically the time of year that you let people know that they might not be continued. So why am I talking about this now? Because in most schools, and if you think about this and think about your own school, there's at least one teacher or one staff member who you're thinking about as you go into this year. And you know deep down that this may be this person's last year in the school. Their performance has suffered. Things haven't been going well. There's something about it that makes you feel uncomfortable. And you're going into this year thinking, I just don't know if this person is going to make it. Now, in many cases, most of us keep these kinds of thoughts to ourselves, right? It's not really enticing and it doesn't feel so nice to sit down with someone and say, hey, look, I think this might be your last year with us. And, about this time next year, I may have let you go. So what we often do is we just don't have that conversation. The teacher, the administrator, whoever else it is, goes into this year thinking it's a regular year. We push those thoughts of maybe we're not going to continue with this person to the back of our heads, figure we'll start the year. And then March, April, May roll around, and we're suddenly in a place where we're again thinking, I don't know that I can continue with this person, but we haven't necessarily told them anything. And then we're stuck. So either we let them go without appropriate warning, or we continue with them because we don't have a choice. We often think about that as a March, April, or May problem. What do we do? How do we manage that situation there? The truth is that the only way to prevent that situation is by going upstream. The problem starts not in May or June. It starts now as we're about to begin the year. So there's a lot to say about letting people go well, right? And it says a lot about an organization when you have to part ways with an employee, how you do it at the time that you're actually making the final decision and having that conversation. But just as important, or perhaps even more important, is what you do right now. So what should you do? If there is an employee, anyone in your organization who you think or who their supervisor thinks may not continue after this current year if their performance doesn't change, now, at the beginning of the year, is when you need to have a direct conversation with them. It needs to be a caring conversation, right? We need to go into that conversation and say, I'm sharing this with you because I care about your future, because I want you to have every chance to succeed. And it needs to have that positive side, but it also can't fall into what educational researchers have coined as positive distortion. Now, it was originally a term coined for the way we sometimes handle parent-teacher conferences, because you really don't necessarily want to tell the parent exactly what's going wrong. And in that circumstance, obviously, we need to tell the parents directly so that we and they can help the child improve. But it's also entirely relevant here, because when we do have that beginning of year conversation, very often the supervisor walks out saying, I really gave that person a message. I did what I needed to do. The employee walks out saying, I'm doing pretty good, but maybe there's something that I need to work on a little bit. And that's not an acceptable outcome. The employee needs to leave that conversation knowing that you care, knowing that you're invested in their success, but also knowing, number one, exactly what you are looking for them to do, exactly what performance areas need to improve, and they need to understand the severity. It's not fair for them to not hear from you that if this does not improve, they may not continue. They need to know what's at stake. And the truth is, for us as supervisors, we need to be fully certain they know what's at stake, because that's the only way we'll be able to have that follow-up conversation, if it comes to it, in May and June, and know that we've done everything we needed to do, pulled out all the stops, tried everything we could in order to enable this person to continue before we may ultimately have made the decision to pull the plug. Now, the way we do that is different for each individual, both depending on the supervisor and the employee. Typically, what I recommend is, number one, figuring out what you truly believe this person's strengths are, why they have a job with you in the first place, and why you believe they do have a chance to improve. Leading in with that, as your belief in them grounds you and gives you an authentic way to show your care, after which you can be very specific. And in these cases, it should also be followed in writing in whatever your internal version of a professional improvement plan is, listing out exactly what the person needs to improve, exactly what the benchmarks are that you're looking for, what will success look like, so that everyone is clear and it is in writing what we're looking for, when we'll check in, and how we'll interpret the results when we get to that point. What I don't want you to do, and what I typically don't recommend, is then wrapping up with a nice positive statement, right? The classic feedback sandwich. So I've told you to start with something positive, authentic about why you believe in them. I've told you to then go to what they need to improve in as specific and measurable and clear a way as possible. But then it's not ending with, and I'm sure everything will be fine. We really love you at this school. It's not ending with anything that the person, the employee, can then take and misunderstand or use to misinterpret and say, you know what, things are really going to be fine. You need to let them end this conversation, still knowing you care, knowing that you believe they can do this, but also knowing what's at stake. And so we have to end the conversation on a semi-uncomfortable note, on saying, this is what we need to improve. It's extremely important that we improve. It's not acceptable for things to continue as they were last year in this area. And instead of saying, and everything's going to be okay, try this. Say, we need to improve, and I am here to help you. Let me know what else I can do. Here are some thoughts I have. And so you put yourself out there as a supportive supervisor without telling the person everything's going to be okay. Because in this kind of situation, when things might not actually be okay, you're being much kinder by letting them understand what's truly at stake. Of course, there's a lot to say about the follow-up, how we implement the plan, the check-ins, but that's not for now. If I can leave you with something today, I'd like you to think about your team, your administrators, your teachers, and determine whether there's anyone who's actually in that scenario of this maybe being their last year if something doesn't change. And if there is, don't let the year just start. Don't let yourself get to March, April, May without them having had enough time to really try to improve, and enough guidance and clarity to know what they need to improve. And so I'll say it as simply as possible, even though I know it's extremely difficult to do. Each one of those people needs a direct sit down at the beginning of the year, where you share your confidence in why you believe they can do this, where you share clearly what needs to change and exactly what bar you're looking for. And then when you don't say, and I'm sure everything will be okay, but you say instead, and I'm here to help you. Here's when we'll check in. Here's what success will look like, and we need this to happen. Hopefully, ideally, the person will have gotten the message clearly, gained greater understanding, benefited from your support, and you won't ever need to have that ultimate dismissal conversation. But if you do have to have that dismissal conversation at the end of the year, you'll know and they'll know that you were clear, that you were open, and that you gave them every possible chance to improve and succeed. And ultimately, that's our responsibility as leaders. So give it some thought. Be honest with yourselves, and then be honest with your people. And ultimately, that gives everyone the best chance for success. You're welcome to ask me any follow-up questions. You can reach me as always, Barry Kislowitz on LinkedIn, Leadership Lenses on Substack, or on our website, kislowitzconsulting.com.